Iron Ridge, nestled in the Appalachian Mountains, was a place where everyone knew everyone. The kind of town where neighbors shared tools and stories, and life moved at a peaceful, deliberate pace. At the center of this community was Sam Carter, a retired Army Ranger who had traded a life of conflict for the solace of fixing engines. Carter's Auto Works was more than a garage. It was a haven. The day began like any other. The smell of motor oil filled the air as Sam tinkered under the hood of an old Ford pickup. His dog, Rusty, lay curled up by the garage door, keeping a lazy watch over Main Street. A soft breeze carried the scent of pine and freshly baked bread from Sarah Thompson's diner across the street. Sam glanced up, nodding at Sarah, who waved back as she served coffee to the early risers. It was a picture of small-town tranquility, but that peace was shattered when 3 roaring motorcycles thundered down Main Street, breaking the morning calm like a bad omen. The riders were members of the Crimson Claws, a biker gang that had recently set up shop in an abandoned factory on the edge of town. Their leader, Jackson Fong Rourke, had earned a reputation as a ruthless and calculating figure who hid menace behind a charming smile. The bikers pulled up in front of Carter's Auto Works, the engines cutting off abruptly. Sam straightened, wiping grease from his hands. His military instincts kicked in, scanning the riders for weapons and noting their aggressive body language. The lead biker, a burly man with a jagged scar across his cheek, stepped forward. "You Carter?" the man asked, his voice gruff. "That's right," Sam replied evenly, meeting the man's gaze without flinching. The biker smirked, pulling a piece of paper from his pocket. "Heard you're running a good business here. Thought you might like some protection, to keep things running smooth." Sam folded his arms across his chest. "We don't need that kind of help around here." The biker's smirk faded, replaced by a hard glare. "That's so? Well, I'd think twice about saying no. Towns like this, accidents happen." Sam's jaw tightened. He took a step forward, his voice low and steady. "Let me be clear. I've seen men like you before, and I know how this ends. You won't find what you're looking for here." The tension hung heavy in the air, the other bikers shifting uncomfortably as they watched their leader. Finally, the man snorted, stepping back toward his bike. "Suit yourself," he said, his smirk returning, "but don't say we didn't warn you." As the motorcycles roared away, Rusty barked after them, his hackles raised. Sam rubbed the dog's head, his eyes narrowing as he watched the bikers disappear down the road. Later that day, word spread that the Crimson Claws had visited Sarah's diner the night before. She hadn't paid, and by morning, her windows were smashed, and her sign was defaced with red claw marks. At the town's community meeting that evening, the atmosphere was tense. Business owners whispered nervously, recounting similar encounters. The mayor, a kind but inexperienced man named Mark Dillard, stood at the podium, trying to calm the room. "We're looking into this," Mark said, his voice unsteady. "I've spoken with the sheriff, and we're evaluating our options." "Options?" Sarah shot back, her voice trembling with frustration. "They smashed my windows and threatened my son. What options do we have besides paying them off?" The room fell silent as Sarah's words hung in the air. Sam stood in the back, arms crossed, observing the growing fear. He finally stepped forward, his calm demeanor commanding attention. "We don't negotiate with bullies," he said firmly. "Giving in only makes them stronger. We stand together, or they'll pick us off one by one." "How do we fight back?" asked Jim, the hardware store owner, his voice tinged with doubt. "They've got numbers, and we're just a bunch of shopkeepers." Sam paused, looking around the room. "We're more than that. This town has been through worse and come out stronger. We know every street, every corner. We can defend ourselves, but only if we work together." His words sparked murmurs of agreement, though doubt still lingered in some faces. Mark nodded hesitantly. "All right, Sam. You seem to know what you're doing. What do you suggest?" "First, we organize," Sam replied. "Set up a watch system. Keep eyes on their movements. We can't afford to be caught off guard. Second, we prepare. Fortify our businesses, install cameras, and make sure everyone knows what to do if they come back." As the meeting ended, the seeds of resistance were planted. Sam returned to his garage, flipping through an old notebook filled with contacts from his military days. He paused on a name, Vanessa Carter, his sister, the one he hadn't spoken to in years. He hesitated, staring at the number before finally dialing. Vanessa? It's Sam. I need your help. The next morning, Sam found his garage vandalized. Tires slashed, windows shattered, and tools scattered across the floor. The message was clear, but Sam didn't back down. He cleaned up the mess, reinforcing his doors and setting up security cameras. Rusty watched silently, sensing his owner's determination. Later, as Sam worked on fixing the damage, a pickup truck pulled into the lot. Jack Hayes, an old friend and former teammate from his Ranger days, stepped out. Vanessa called me, Jack said with a grin. Said you've got a biker problem. Thought you might need a hand. Sam couldn't help but smile. You have no idea how glad I am to see you. As the two men talked, a renewed sense of purpose filled the air. The Crimson Claws had underestimated Iron Ridge, mistaking its quiet streets for weakness. But they were about to learn that this town was stronger than it seemed, and Sam Carter was ready to lead the fight. The morning sun bathed Iron Ridge in golden light, but the mood at Carter's Auto Works was anything but serene. Sam Carter stood outside his garage, surveying the damage from the Crimson Claw's nighttime visit. Broken glass glittered on the pavement, his front sign hung askew, and the words, "Back off," were spray-painted in bold red letters across the garage door. Jack Hayes crouched beside a pile of slashed tires, shaking his head. Looks like they're trying to make a statement. Sam, arms crossed, stared at the vandalism with calm resolve. So are we. This ends here. Jack chuckled. Same old Sam. Always ready to take on the world. Not just the world, Sam replied. A bunch of bullies who think they can scare a small town into submission. Inside the garage, Sam's dog Rusty paced nervously, barking at every sound from the street. Sam scratched behind the dog's ears to calm him down before grabbing his phone. Who are you calling? Jack asked. Vanessa, Sam said, dialing. Vanessa Carter, Sam's younger sister, answered on the first ring. Her tone was sharp, as if she'd been expecting the call. I heard about the gang. You sure this is something you want to handle on your own? I don't have a choice, Sam replied. They're tearing this town apart. People are scared. Businesses are giving in just to keep their families safe. Vanessa sighed. All right, I'll see what I can pull from my end. We've been tracking a few biker gangs that might fit the profile. The Crimson Claws are likely part of something bigger. What do you mean? Sam asked. They're not just shaking down small businesses for pocket money, Vanessa explained. We believe they're part of a network trafficking weapons and drugs across state lines. Your little town might be one of their new hubs. Sam tightened his grip on the phone. If that's true, we don't have time to waste. Be smart, Sam, Vanessa warned. Don't go looking for trouble without backup. I'll send you what I find. By mid-afternoon, word of the garage's vandalism had spread through town. Sarah Thompson stopped by with her son, Tommy, bringing coffee and sandwiches. Thanks, Sarah, Sam said, accepting the coffee. She looked around at the damage, her expression a mix of anger and fear. It's not just you, Sam. They hit Jim's hardware store last night, too. Smashed his windows and stole some supplies. Tommy, clutching his mother's hand, looked up at Sam. Are they going to hurt us? Sam crouched down, meeting the boy's eyes. Not if I have anything to say about it. Jack approached, holding a clipboard with a sketched-out map of the town. All right, Sam. If we're going to make a stand, we need a plan. That evening, Sam and Jack met with a small group of trusted townsfolk in the back room of Sarah's diner. The attendees included Jim, Sarah, and the town's unofficial historian, Maggie Keller, whose sharp mind and vast knowledge of Iron Ridge made her invaluable. Sam spread a large map of the town across the table. We're going to set up a watch system, he began. Everyone here knows this town better than the back of their hand. We'll use that to our advantage. Jack pointed to key locations on the map. We'll need volunteers to keep an eye on the main roads, especially near the diner and the hardware store. If you see something suspicious, call it in. Don't engage. What about defenses? Jim asked. They've already hit your garage. What's to stop them from doing worse? Cameras and lights, Sam replied. I've already ordered security cameras and motion-activated floodlights. If you want, I can help you set them up at your stores. Maggie tapped a spot on the map. What about the old firehouse? It's been empty for years, but it has a clear line of sight to Main Street. Good idea, Sam said. We'll use it as a lookout point. The next day, the first shipment of security equipment arrived. Sam and Jack spent hours installing cameras around the garage, the diner, and Jim's hardware store. Rusty followed them faithfully, wagging his tail despite the tense atmosphere. By the time the sun dipped below the mountains, they'd covered most of Main Street. Sam leaned against the diner's porch railing, exhausted but satisfied. It's a start, he said. Jack nodded. A good one. But if Vanessa's right and this gang is part of something bigger, we'll need more than cameras. As if on cue, a familiar truck pulled into the lot. A tall, broad-shouldered man stepped out, his face breaking into a grin when he saw Sam. Marcus Bear Williams, Jack said, clapping the newcomer on the back. What brings you to Iron Ridge? Vanessa called, Marcus replied, his deep voice carrying a hint of humor. Said Sam needed some muscle. Figured I'd lend a hand. Sam smirked. Good to see you, Bear. Welcome to the fight. That night, as the town slept, Sam, Jack, and Marcus patrolled the streets. The newly installed cameras fed live footage to a makeshift control station in the diner's back room. Around midnight, movement caught their attention. A group of bikers, their headlights off, crept down a side street. Looks like they're scoping out the hardware store, Jack muttered, watching the screen. Marcus cracked his knuckles. Time to send a message. The three men moved swiftly and silently, intercepting the bikers before they could cause any damage. Using non-lethal tactics, they disarmed and restrained the intruders, leaving them tied to a lamppost with a note. Iron Ridge stands together. The next morning, the entire town buzzed with the news. Sam knew the incident would escalate tensions, but he also saw a spark of hope in the eyes of his neighbors. That spark dimmed when Jackson Rourke himself rolled into town, flanked by 5 bikers. He dismounted his bike with practiced ease, his leather jacket gleaming in the sunlight. He walked straight into Carter's Auto Works, his smile sharp and predatory. You think tying up my men is going to stop me? Sam stepped forward, unflinching. No, but it's a good start. Jackson's smile widened. You've got guts, Carter. I'll give you that. But this isn't just about you. Keep pushing, and your little town won't be standing by the time I'm done. Sam stared him down. We're not going anywhere. As Jackson and his men rode off, Sam turned to Jack and Marcus. This is only the beginning. We need to be ready for whatever comes next. Iron Ridge was drawing its line in the sand, and Sam Carter was determined to defend it at all costs. The next morning, Iron Ridge woke to a new reality. The confrontation at Carter's Auto Works the day before had sent a clear message to the Crimson Claws. This town wasn't going to roll over. But as Sam Carter knew too well, defiance alone wasn't enough. Preparation was essential. Sam stood in the diner, sipping coffee as he reviewed his notes. Jack and Marcus sat across from him, studying the town map spread out on the table. Rusty lay curled at Sam's feet, his ears occasionally twitching at the sound of passing cars. We've got the cameras up, and we're starting to track their movements, Sam said. But if Vanessa's right about this being part of something bigger, we need more than just eyes on the streets. We need a real plan. Marcus nodded, his massive frame making the diner booth look small. Agreed. These guys aren't amateurs. They'll come back with numbers and strategy. If we're not ready, they'll steamroll us. Jack leaned back, his hands behind his head. So, what's the play, boss? Sam tapped a point on the map where the firehouse Saturday. We're turning this into our headquarters. Maggie was right. It's got a great vantage point, and it's far enough from Main Street that we can work without drawing attention. Smart, Marcus said. What about the rest of the town? They're scared. We need them on board. That's the next step, Sam replied. We hold a meeting tonight. No more hiding. If we're going to protect Iron Ridge, everyone needs to be involved. That evening, the firehouse bustled with activity. Dozens of townsfolk gathered in the main hall, their faces a mix of worry and determination. Sam stood at the front of the room, flanked by Jack, Marcus, and Maggie Keller, who had agreed to help organize the effort. Thank you all for coming, Sam began, his voice calm but firm. I won't sugarcoat it. This isn't going away unless we make it go away. The Crimson Claws think they can intimidate us, but they've underestimated what this town is capable of. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some nodded in agreement, while others looked doubtful. "We're not fighters, Sam," said Jim, the hardware store owner. "What can we do against a gang like that?" Sam gestured to the map behind him. "You don't have to fight. What we need is coordination. We know this town better than they ever will. That's our advantage." Jack stepped forward. "We've already set up a basic surveillance network with cameras on Main Street and near the key businesses. But we need more eyes. If you're willing to volunteer, we can teach you how to monitor the feeds and report anything suspicious. Watch groups will patrol in pairs," Maggie added, pointing to a list of shifts on the wall. "We'll stick to well-lit areas and keep a direct line to Sam or the sheriff if anything happens." "What about defenses?" asked Sarah Thompson. "What happens if they come back in force?" "That's where I come in," Marcus said, his deep voice commanding attention. "We're fortifying critical locations, reinforced doors, motion-activated lights, and barricades if necessary. This isn't about going toe-to-toe with them. It's about making Iron Ridge a place they don't want to mess with." As the meeting ended, a sense of cautious optimism filled the room. Neighbors who had barely spoken to each other were now exchanging phone numbers and discussing patrol routes. Outside, Sam stood on the firehouse steps, watching the crowd disperse. Marcus joined him, arms crossed. "They're scared, but they've got heart. That's a good start." "It's more than I expected," Sam admitted. "But it won't be enough if Jackson brings reinforcements." "He will," Marcus said. "Guys like him always do." The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. Sam worked tirelessly, helping Jim install reinforced locks at the hardware store and guiding Sarah as she secured the diner's windows. Maggie coordinated volunteers to clear brush from around the firehouse, ensuring a clear line of sight to Main Street. In the evenings, Sam trained the watch groups, teaching them how to stay alert and report without putting themselves in danger. Jack set up a central monitoring station in the firehouse, linking all the camera feeds to a single screen. "You're a regular tech wizard, Jack," Maggie said, watching as he fine-tuned the system. Jack grinned. "Just like riding a bike. Except the bike has wires and costs way more." By the end of the week, Iron Ridge felt like a town transformed. The Crimson Claws hadn't been seen since their failed attempt at the hardware store, but no one was under any illusions that the gang had given up. One evening, as the sun dipped below the mountains, a familiar rumble echoed through the streets. Sam stepped out of the garage, his jaw tightening as he saw 5 motorcycles roll into town. The riders stopped in front of the diner, their engines idling menacingly. Jackson Rourke dismounted, his leather jacket catching the fading light. He strode inside, ignoring Sarah's attempts to block his path. Sam followed, his presence filling the room like a storm cloud. "Leave her alone, Jackson." Jackson turned, a mocking smile on his face. "Carter, always so noble. You think you can stop what's coming?" "I know I can," Sam replied, his voice steady. Jackson chuckled. "You're a stubborn one. But let's make this clear. I'm not going anywhere. You keep playing hero, and it won't just be your garage we burn." The room fell silent. Sam took a step closer, his eyes locked on Jackson's. "You don't scare me, and you don't scare this town. Leave while you still can." Jackson studied him for a moment, then smirked. "Enjoy your little victory, Carter. It won't last." As Jackson and his gang roared out of town, Sam turned to Sarah and the other onlookers. "This isn't over, but we're ready." That night, Sam sat outside the firehouse, Rusty at his side. Jack and Marcus joined him, the 3 men sharing a quiet moment under the stars. "You really think we can pull this off?" Jack asked. "We don't have a choice," Sam said. "They're coming, and they're not going to stop until we make them." Marcus nodded. "Then we make them, one way or another." As the town settled into uneasy silence, Sam's mind raced with thoughts of what lay ahead. The Crimson Claws were testing their resolve, but Iron Ridge had something they didn't, a community willing to stand together. Iron Ridge had become a town on edge. The air seemed heavier, the streets quieter, and even the birds that sang at dawn sounded subdued. The residents, though more united than ever, carried the weight of anticipation as they prepared for the Crimson Claw's inevitable retaliation. Sam Carter sat in the newly repurposed firehouse headquarters, his eyes glued to the surveillance monitors. Jack Hayes stood beside him, reviewing a growing log of activity reports. "They're testing us," Jack said, pointing to a recent clip showing two bikers cruising slowly down Main Street. "No vandalism, no threats, just making sure we see them." Sam nodded grimly. "They're watching, trying to figure out how much we know and how far we're willing to go." It's classic intimidation. Rusty, lying by Sam's feet, let out a low growl as though sensing his owner's unease. Marcus Williams entered, carrying a stack of papers. "Got word from Vanessa. She sent over some interesting intel about our friends in leather." Sam looked up. "What did she find?" Marcus dropped the papers on the table and gestured to a few highlighted sections. "Turns out the Crimson Claws are more organized than we thought. They're not just a biker gang. They're a cog in a much larger machine. Weapons trafficking, drug distribution, you name it. And Iron Ridge is a key spot in their plan." Sam leaned forward, scanning the documents. Vanessa had included detailed notes on the gang's suspected operations, connections to other criminal groups, and known alliances. "They're using us as a distribution hub," Marcus continued. "Small town, low law enforcement presence, perfect for moving shipments without drawing attention." Jack frowned. "So this isn't just about extortion. This is about control. If they take Iron Ridge, they've got a free pass to expand their operations across the region." Later that day, Sam gathered the core group of townsfolk at the firehouse. Sarah Thompson, Jim from the hardware store, and Maggie Keller joined Marcus, Jack, and a few other trusted volunteers. Sam stood in front of a whiteboard filled with maps, diagrams, and photos Vanessa had sent. "This is bigger than we thought," Sam began. "The Crimson Claws aren't just looking to scare us into paying. They're trying to establish Iron Ridge as a base of operations for their entire network." The room buzzed with murmurs of unease. Maggie raised her hand. "What does that mean for us? What do they want?" "They want control," Marcus said, stepping forward. "If they can intimidate us into submission, they'll have free rein to use this town however they want. Storage for illegal shipments, meeting points for deals, even hiding places for their men." Jim stood up, his voice shaking. "We can't let that happen. But how do we fight something that big?" Sam pointed to the board. "We fight smart. We know their movements, their tactics. They think we're just a small town, easy to bully. But we've got something they don't, each other." Jack grinned. "And a few tricks up our sleeves." Over the next few days, Iron Ridge transformed into a quiet fortress. The townsfolk worked in shifts, fortifying key locations, setting up additional cameras, and running patrols. Marcus trained volunteers in basic defensive tactics, focusing on how to protect themselves without escalating violence. At the same time, Vanessa's intel provided valuable insights into the gang's hierarchy. Jackson Fong Rourke was clearly in charge, but several key lieutenants handled specific operations. Randy Vex Kane, logistics expert, oversaw shipments of weapons and contraband. Dina Steele Vasquez, enforcer, coordinated intimidation efforts. Connor Rogue Malone, tactician, was suspected of planning large-scale operations. "If we can disrupt their chain of command, we'll cripple them," Sam said during a strategy meeting. "Easier said than done," Jack replied. "These people aren't amateurs. They're used to working under pressure." "Then we make the pressure unbearable," Sam said. That pressure came in the form of a decisive first strike. Late one night, Sam, Jack, and Marcus intercepted a shipment of weapons the Crimson Claws were attempting to smuggle into town. Using Vanessa's intel and their military training, they set up an ambush near the abandoned train depot. The plan was executed with precision. Jack disabled the gang's communications while Marcus and Sam neutralized the bikers guarding the shipment. They left the cargo intact but destroyed the vehicles, ensuring the gang would have to regroup and rethink their approach. The retaliation came swiftly. 2 nights later, Jackson and his crew rolled into town in force. The sound of engines echoed through the streets as more than a dozen bikes parked in front of Sarah's diner. Jackson walked in, his eyes scanning the room until they landed on Sarah. "Where's Carter?" he demanded. Sarah, standing behind the counter, didn't flinch. "Not here." Jackson smirked. Well, you tell him he's making a mistake. And mistakes like this tend to cost more than just broken windows. From across the street, Sam and Marcus watched through binoculars, hidden in the shadows of the firehouse. What's he playing at? Marcus muttered. Testing us, Sam said, trying to draw us out. The gang left without causing damage, but their message was clear. Escalation was coming. The next morning, Sam met with Vanessa via a secure video call. Her expression was grim. Sam, I just got word that Jackson's called for reinforcements. Bikers from neighboring chapters are heading your way. How many? Sam asked. Enough to overwhelm you if you're not careful, Vanessa replied. You need to be ready for a full-scale attack. We will be, Sam said, but I need more from you. Can you tie them to their bigger network? If we can prove their connection to weapons trafficking, we can bring the FBI in. I'm working on it, Vanessa said, but it's a race against time. As Iron Ridge braced for the next wave, Sam focused on rallying the community. He held another meeting, this time urging everyone to stay strong and united. They'll try to scare us, divide us, Sam said. But remember this. Every time we stand together, we make it harder for them to win. Jim stood up, his voice firmer than before. We're with you, Sam. Whatever it takes. That night, Sam stood watch outside the firehouse, Rusty by his side. The mountains loomed dark and silent, but Sam's mind was racing. He knew the Crimson Claws wouldn't stop until they either took the town or were forced to leave for good. We're ready for you, Sam muttered to himself, his grip tightening on the rifle slung over his shoulder. The battle for Iron Ridge wasn't just about protecting a town. It was about showing that even the strongest bullies could be brought down by a united community. The night was heavy with tension. The streets of Iron Ridge were eerily quiet, save for the occasional howl of a distant coyote. Every home had their lights dimmed, and the townsfolk who weren't on patrol huddled inside, waiting. At the firehouse, now the town's command center, Sam Carter and his team reviewed the latest surveillance feeds. They're coming, Jack said, pointing to the monitors. A column of motorcycles moved along the highway toward the town, their headlights cutting through the darkness. That's at least 20 bikes. And those vans? They're hauling something bigger than weapons. Marcus leaned over the map of Iron Ridge, laid out on the table. They're not just rolling in to intimidate. This is an invasion. Sam nodded grimly. That means we stick to the plan. Everyone knows their roles. No one breaks position. Rusty barked softly, as though sensing the unease in the room. Sam knelt to scratch behind the dog's ears. Stay sharp, boy. We've got a long night ahead. As the Crimson Claws entered the town limits, Jackson Rourke led the pack. His lieutenant, Dina Steele Vasquez, rode close behind, her expression cold and calculating. Jackson raised a hand, signaling the gang to stop just outside Main Street. We do this clean, Jackson said. Take out their defenses, break their spirits. By dawn, this town belongs to us. Dina smirked. What if they fight back? Then we remind them why no one stands up to the Claws, Jackson replied, his voice laced with menace. The attack began just after midnight. The gang split into smaller units, targeting key locations around town. One group moved toward the diner, another to the hardware store, and a third headed for Carter's Auto Works. From the firehouse, Sam watched it all unfold on the surveillance feeds. Here we go, he muttered. Maggie, report in. Maggie Keller, stationed with a group of volunteers at the diner, spoke over the radio. We see them. They're scoping the place out, but we're ready. Hold your position, Sam instructed. No engagement unless absolutely necessary. At the hardware store, Jim and two other volunteers watched nervously as 3 bikers approached the building. They'd fortified the windows with steel bars and reinforced the doors, but the sound of the gang revving their engines outside was enough to make anyone's resolve waver. Think they'll try to break in? One of the volunteers whispered. If they do, we've got this, Jim said, gripping the radio. Meanwhile, Jackson led a larger group toward the firehouse. His sharp eyes scanned the darkened streets, searching for any sign of resistance. They're hiding, Dina said, pulling up beside him. They're planning, Jackson corrected, but they won't outsmart us. As the gang neared the firehouse, Motion-activated floodlights suddenly snapped on, bathing the area in blinding white light. Jackson shielded his eyes and barked a command. Spread out. Find their weak points. Inside the firehouse, Marcus watched the gang's movements on the monitors. They're splitting up. Classic pincer move. Let them, Sam said. Jack, trigger the first line. Jack grinned, tapping a button on his laptop. Outside, hidden speakers blared the sound of police sirens and barking dogs. The sudden noise caused confusion among the bikers, who looked around wildly for the source. They're spooked, Marcus said with a chuckle. Not for long, Sam replied. Maggie, status? Their group just smashed a window at the diner, Maggie reported. But they're hesitating. I think the lights and cameras are throwing them off. Good. Keep them guessing, Sam said. At the hardware store, the bikers began ramming the front door with a crowbar. Jim and his team activated a set of pre-installed flashbang traps, which exploded with bursts of light and sound, sending the bikers reeling. They're retreating, Jim shouted into the radio. Let them, Sam said. Don't chase. Hold your position. By 2 a.m., the Crimson Claw's initial assault had stalled. Their attempts to breach key locations were thwarted by a combination of strategic defenses and the townsfolk's resolve. But Jackson wasn't finished. We're not leaving here empty-handed, he roared, rallying his gang at the center of town. Steele, take your team and hit the firehouse hard. Rogue, get that van ready. We're taking whatever we can load up from Carter's Auto Works. As the gang regrouped, Sam's radio crackled to life. Vanessa here. We've got eyes on the highway. Reinforcements are 10 minutes out. FBI's closing in. Good timing, Sam said. We just have to hold them a little longer. The final assault came swiftly and with brutal force. Dina led a group of bikers in an all-out charge on the firehouse, using crowbars and sledgehammers to batter the reinforced doors. Inside, Marcus and a group of volunteers stood ready, armed with non-lethal tools like pepper spray and wooden batons. As the doors began to splinter, Marcus turned to Sam. You better have a plan for when they break through. I always do, Sam replied, holding up a small remote. The moment the doors gave way, Sam triggered a set of hidden smoke canisters, filling the entryway with thick, choking fog. The bikers coughed and stumbled, their attack faltering as Marcus and his team moved in to drive them back. At Carter's Auto Works, Jackson personally led the raid, smashing through what remained of the already damaged garage doors. Inside, he found nothing but empty space and a single note pinned to the wall. You picked the wrong town. Jackson growled in frustration, kicking over a toolbox. Where is he? By 3 a.m., the FBI arrived in force, their flashing lights cutting through the darkness. Agents swarmed the town, rounding up bikers who had been disabled by the townsfolk's defenses. Jackson, realizing he was outmatched, tried to rally his remaining men for a retreat, but it was too late. Sam and Marcus intercepted them near the firehouse, blocking their escape route with an overturned truck. You're done, Jackson, Sam said, stepping forward. Call it. Jackson sneered, his eyes blazing with defiance. This isn't over. It is for you, Marcus said, leveling a non-lethal beanbag shotgun at him. Surrounded and outnumbered, Jackson finally dropped his weapon. The FBI agents moved in, cuffing him and his remaining crew. As dawn broke over Iron Ridge, the town emerged from the chaos victorious. The streets were littered with debris, but the community stood together, stronger than ever. Sam, standing on the firehouse steps, looked out at the rising sun. Jack and Marcus joined him, both looking weary but satisfied. We did it, Jack said. For now, Sam replied. But this was just the first battle. There's a bigger fight coming. We'll be ready, Marcus said confidently. And as the first rays of sunlight touched the mountains, Iron Ridge prepared to rebuild. Stronger, united, and determined to protect their home at any cost. The morning sun revealed the scars Iron Ridge had earned during the Crimson Claw's assault. Broken windows, scorched wood, and scattered debris dotted the streets. But the damage couldn't overshadow the town's triumph. The Crimson Claws were defeated, their leader Jackson Rourke and key lieutenants now in FBI custody. Sam Carter stood outside the firehouse, surveying the cleanup efforts. Volunteers were already sweeping up broken glass and patching storefronts. Maggie Keller directed traffic near the diner, ensuring the flow of supplies. Sarah Thompson was handing out coffee and sandwiches to the weary townsfolk. "This town's got heart," Marcus Williams said, stepping up beside Sam. "They took everything the Claws threw at them and didn't back down." Sam nodded. "They're tougher than they look. But this isn't over, not by a long shot." Jack Hayes joined them, holding a tablet displaying Vanessa Carter's latest report. "She just sent this over." Turns out the Claws were only one piece of the puzzle. Sam took the tablet and read through the report. Vanessa's investigation revealed that the Crimson Claws were working under orders from a larger criminal network called the Black Vanguard, a shadowy organization with ties to arms trafficking, drug smuggling, and money laundering. "They weren't just here for extortion," Sam said, his voice grim. "This town was supposed to be a staging ground for a much bigger operation." "Looks like the FBI got what they needed," Jack said, pointing to a list of confiscated items. Shipping manifests, transaction records, and encrypted communications. Enough to start pulling threads. Later that afternoon, an FBI convoy rolled into town. Vanessa Carter stepped out of the lead vehicle, her professional demeanor contrasting with the warmth in her eyes as she approached her brother. "Nice work, Sam," Vanessa said, shaking his hand. "Couldn't have done it without you," Sam replied. "What's the word?" Vanessa sighed. "We've confirmed that the Black Vanguard was using the Crimson Claws to expand their influence into rural areas. Iron Ridge was meant to be their foothold in the Appalachians. The Claws were just the muscle. And the brains?" Marcus asked. Vanessa's expression darkened. "That's the real problem. The Vanguard's leaders operate out of major cities, far removed from the ground-level operations. Taking them down will take time, but this is a solid start." "What about the Claws still out there?" Jack asked. "We're coordinating with local law enforcement and state agencies to track down their remaining chapters," Vanessa said. "But don't let your guard down. Some of them might try to retaliate." As the FBI agents processed evidence, the townsfolk gathered in the diner for an impromptu meeting. Sam stood at the center of the room, addressing the crowd. "We won a big fight last night," Sam began. "But it's not over. The Crimson Claws might be gone, but there's a bigger threat out there. We need to stay vigilant." Maggie Keller raised her hand. "What can we do to make sure this doesn't happen again?" Sam glanced at Vanessa, who nodded. "We've got resources now," Vanessa said. "Training programs, security equipment, and law enforcement support. If you're willing, we can help turn Iron Ridge into a model for community defense." The room buzzed with murmurs of agreement. Jim from the hardware store stood up. "If it means protecting my family and my business, I'm in." "Me too," Sarah added. "Whatever it takes." Over the next few days, the town transformed again, this time from a battlefield into a hub of organization and planning. Vanessa's team worked with Sam and the townsfolk to set up long-term security measures. Neighborhood watch groups. Volunteers organized patrols to monitor the streets, ensuring that any suspicious activity was reported immediately. Emergency response training. Marcus led sessions on basic self-defense and first aid, equipping residents with the skills to protect themselves and help others. Community surveillance. Jack upgraded the town's camera network, linking it to a central command center in the firehouse. "Feels like we're building a fortress," Jim said, watching Marcus demonstrate how to reinforce a door frame. "It's not about walls," Sam replied. "It's about people standing together. That's what keeps us safe." Despite the progress, tension lingered in the air. One evening, as Sam was locking up the firehouse, he noticed Rusty growling at the shadows. His instincts flared, and he scanned the area. A figure stepped out of the darkness. Connor "Rogue" Malone, one of the Crimson Claw's top tacticians who had evaded capture. "Well, well," Rogue said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "The great Sam Carter. Didn't think you'd take down Jackson, but here you are." Sam's hand hovered near his sidearm. "What do you want, Rogue?" "To talk," Rogue said, raising his hands in mock surrender. "I've got information. Stuff the FBI might find interesting. But I'm not giving it up for free." "Why should I trust you?" Sam asked. "Because I know how the Vanguard works," Rogue replied. "I can't tell you what their next move is. You want to keep Iron Ridge safe? You'll want to hear what I have to say. Rogue's information was a mixed blessing. He confirmed that the Black Vanguard was planning to retaliate, using another gang to test the town's defenses. But he also provided details about their broader network, names, locations, and operations that could help the FBI dismantle the organization. Vanessa was skeptical. He's a wild card, Sam. He could be playing us. I know, Sam said. But if even half of what he's saying is true, we can't ignore it. Marcus folded his arms. So what's the play? Sam thought for a moment. We prepare for the worst, and we use what he's given us to take the fight to them. In the days that followed, Iron Ridge braced itself for another storm. Rogue's intel allowed Vanessa's team to make arrests in neighboring states, disrupting the Black Vanguard's operations. But the town knew it was only a matter of time before the next test came. Sam stood outside the firehouse one evening, watching the sun dip below the mountains. Jack joined him, a cup of coffee in hand. Think we'll ever get back to normal? Jack asked. This is the new normal, Sam replied. But that doesn't mean we can't make it better. As the stars began to dot the sky, Sam felt a renewed sense of purpose. Iron Ridge had proven it could stand against the odds, and now it was ready to lead by example. The battle wasn't over, but the town was stronger and more united than ever before. Iron Ridge had endured its first battle against the Crimson Claws, but the looming presence of the Black Vanguard cast a long shadow over the town. As Vanessa Carter and her FBI team pieced together the intel provided by Connor "Rogue" Malone, they uncovered the full scope of the Vanguard's reach. A sprawling network that operated across state lines, using small towns like Iron Ridge as unassuming hubs for illegal operations. Sam Carter sat in the firehouse-turned-command center, surrounded by maps, monitors, and notes. Rogue, seated across from him, had become a reluctant ally, his sharp eyes constantly scanning the room as though expecting betrayal. They'll come, Rogue said, breaking the silence. And when they do, it won't be a handful of bikers. The Vanguard doesn't take hits like this lightly. Sam leaned forward, his voice low but firm. Then we hit them first. The plan was ambitious and risky. Vanessa's team had traced shipments tied to the Vanguard to a warehouse outside a neighboring city. It was a critical node in their operation, used to distribute weapons and drugs throughout the region. This is where it starts, Vanessa said during a briefing with the core group at the firehouse. If we take this place down, we disrupt their supply chain and send a message that Iron Ridge isn't a target. They're the ones being hunted. Marcus studied the blueprint of the warehouse. Tight security, guard rotations, surveillance cameras, reinforced gates. This isn't some gang hideout. It's a fortress. Which is why we're working with the FBI on this one, Vanessa said. We'll need precision and coordination. Sam, I want you and your team to handle recon. We can't risk going in blind. Sam nodded. We'll get it done. Under the cover of darkness, Sam, Jack, and Marcus approached the warehouse in a nondescript van. Rogue accompanied them, his knowledge of Vanguard operations proving invaluable. See those two guys near the entrance? Rogue whispered, pointing to the guards. They're not just muscle, they're runners. If things go south, they'll call for backup faster than you can blink. Sam signaled to Marcus, who pulled out a high-powered scope to observe the guards. We'll handle it quietly. Jack, you're on the cameras. Get us a blind spot. Within minutes, Jack hacked into the warehouse's security system, creating a small window for Sam and Marcus to move closer. The duo slipped through the shadows, taking down the guards silently and securing the entrance. Rogue, watching from the van, smirked. Not bad, Carter. You've still got it. Save the compliments, Sam said over the radio. We're just getting started. The team's recon provided Vanessa with the information she needed to coordinate the raid. 2 days later, an FBI tactical unit joined forces with the Iron Ridge volunteers to launch a surprise attack on the warehouse. The operation unfolded with military precision. Marcus and a team of volunteers blocked the rear exits while FBI agents stormed the main entrance. Inside, chaos erupted as the Vanguard operatives scrambled to defend their territory. Sam, moving with practiced efficiency, led a small team to secure the upper floors where critical documents and computer servers were stored. Rogue followed closely, guiding them through the maze of hallways. Third door on the left, Rogue said, pointing. That's their main office. Anything worth finding will be in there. Sam kicked the door open, and the team swept the room. Jack immediately began downloading data from the computers while Marcus secured a stash of weapons hidden in a false wall. Got it, Jack announced. Shipping routes, contact lists, financial records. This is gold. The raid was a resounding success. By dawn, the warehouse was under FBI control, and several high-ranking Vanguard operatives were in custody. Vanessa reviewed the confiscated documents, her expression both triumphant and grim. This is enough to cripple their operations in the region, she said. But it's also proof of how deep this goes. These people have connections in law enforcement, politics, even corporations. Sam crossed his arms. How much time do we have before they regroup? Not much, Vanessa admitted. But we've bought ourselves a window. If we use it wisely, we can stay ahead of them. Back in Iron Ridge, the town was buzzing with both relief and determination. The success of the warehouse raid had bolstered their morale, but it also reinforced the reality that the fight was far from over. Maggie Keller organized a town meeting to update everyone on the situation. Sam stood at the front of the room, addressing the crowd. We struck a major blow against the Black Vanguard, Sam began. But they're still out there, and they're not going to forget what we did. That means we have to stay ready. Jim, the hardware store owner, raised his hand. What can we do now? Keep building, Sam replied. We've proven that when we stand together, we're unstoppable. Let's make sure this town is a place they'll never want to come back to. The crowd erupted in applause, their unity stronger than ever. Later that night, Sam and Vanessa sat on the firehouse steps, looking out over the quiet streets of Iron Ridge. You think this is enough? Sam asked. It's a start, Vanessa said. But the Vanguard won't go down without a fight. You're on their radar now, Sam. You and this whole town. Let them come, Sam said, his voice resolute. We'll be ready. Rusty barked softly, as if echoing Sam's sentiment. In the distance, the stars twinkled in the clear night sky, a reminder that even in the darkest times, there was always light. Iron Ridge had proven its resilience, and Sam was determined to ensure it stayed that way. The morning after the warehouse raid, Iron Ridge woke to cautious optimism. The battle wasn't over, but for the first time, the town felt like it had the upper hand. The FBI's success had dealt a significant blow to the Black Vanguard's operations, and the residents of Iron Ridge were determined to build on that momentum. Sam Carter stood in the firehouse, now a hub of activity. Jack was at his usual spot, monitoring surveillance feeds and coordinating with nearby towns. Marcus reviewed a checklist of new security measures with Maggie Keller. Vanessa Carter was on a video call with FBI Command, relaying intel from the raid. We've got confirmation, Vanessa announced, stepping away from the call. The data Jack pulled from the warehouse is already leading to more arrests. They've hit 3 additional Vanguard facilities in neighboring states. That's good news, Sam said, though his expression remained serious. But it won't stop them completely. No, Vanessa agreed, but it puts them on the defensive. That's where we want them. As Iron Ridge fortified itself further, Vanessa began working with the townsfolk to create a sustainable long-term defense plan. Community defense training. Marcus expanded his self-defense workshops into full-scale training sessions, teaching both adults and teenagers how to protect themselves and respond to emergencies. Mutual aid network. Maggie and Sarah coordinated with nearby towns, creating a system where communities could share resources and support in times of crisis. Advanced surveillance. Jack upgraded the town's security system with motion sensors and encrypted communications, ensuring that Iron Ridge would never again be caught off guard. Feels like we're turning into a fortress, Sarah remarked during a meeting. Not a fortress, Sam corrected. A safe haven. A place where people can stand together against threats like this. Despite their preparations, Sam knew that the Black Vanguard wouldn't simply vanish. Rogue's warning echoed in his mind. They don't forget. They don't forgive. That night, as Sam patrolled the streets with Rusty by his side, his radio crackled to life. Sam, Vanessa's voice came through. You'd better get to the firehouse. Now. Sam hurried back, finding Vanessa, Marcus, and Jack gathered around the monitors. On the screen, a convoy of black SUVs and motorcycles was heading straight for Iron Ridge. They're making their move, Vanessa said. How many? Sam asked. More than we've ever seen, Jack replied, his voice tense. This is a full-scale assault. The town sprang into action. Volunteers took up positions at key locations, while Vanessa coordinated with FBI units stationed just outside Iron Ridge. Marcus and Maggie directed groups to reinforce barricades and secure vulnerable areas. Everyone knows their roles, Sam said, addressing the group. We've trained for this. We've prepared. Now we show them what Iron Ridge is made of. The assault began just before midnight. The roar of engines echoed through the mountains as the Vanguard operatives rolled into town. Floodlights snapped on, illuminating the attackers as they approached. Sam stood at the firehouse, watching the chaos unfold through the monitors. Jack, activate the outer defenses. Jack pressed a button, triggering a series of remotely operated barricades and traps. Spiked strips shredded tires, forcing the SUVs to stop. Smoke canisters erupted, creating a wall of confusion. Nice touch, Marcus said, watching the Vanguard operatives scramble to regroup. At the diner, Maggie and her team held their ground, using reinforced windows and strategic defenses to repel the attackers. They're trying to breach the back, Maggie reported over the radio. Hold tight, Marcus replied. Help is on the way. At the hardware store, Jim and a group of volunteers faced a similar challenge. Armed with non-lethal weapons, they managed to drive off a group of bikers attempting to loot the building. We're holding here, Jim said breathlessly, but they're regrouping. The real test came at the firehouse. The Vanguard operatives had identified it as the town's command center and launched an all-out attack. Jackson Rourke, who had somehow escaped FBI custody, led the charge. This ends tonight, Carter, Jackson shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. Not the way you think, Sam muttered, gripping his rifle. Jackson's men used battering rams to breach the firehouse doors, only to be met with smoke and tear gas. Marcus and a team of volunteers pushed them back with precision strikes, while Vanessa directed reinforcements to the area. By dawn, the battle was over. The Vanguard operatives had been driven out, their vehicles disabled, and their leadership fractured. Jackson, captured once again, was handed over to the FBI, this time under maximum security measures. As the sun rose over Iron Ridge, the town stood victorious. The streets bore the marks of the fight, burnt-out vehicles, broken barricades, but the spirit of the community remained unbroken. In the days that followed, Iron Ridge became a symbol of resilience. News of their victory spread, inspiring other towns to take a stand against similar threats. Vanessa worked tirelessly to ensure the evidence gathered during the battle led to more arrests and prosecutions, further dismantling the Black Vanguard's network. At a town meeting, Sam addressed the residents. We faced the worst they could throw at us, and we stood tall. Not because of one person, but because of all of us. Iron Ridge isn't just a town, it's a family, and no one messes with family. The crowd erupted in applause, their pride and unity stronger than ever. Months later, the firehouse had been restored, now serving as both a community center and a command hub. The diner and hardware store thrived, and new businesses began to open. Iron Ridge wasn't just rebuilding, it was thriving. Vanessa prepared to leave, her work with the FBI calling her to the next mission. You've got this under control, she said to Sam as they stood outside the firehouse. We'll miss you, Sam said, but don't be a stranger. Vanessa smiled. I won't. As she drove away, Sam turned back to the town he had fought so hard to protect. Rusty barked happily at his side, and Sam gave the dog a pat. We did it, boy, he said. Iron Ridge is safe. The town had proven that even in the face of overwhelming odds, a united community could stand against anything. Iron Ridge wasn't just a safe haven. It was a beacon of hope, a reminder that strength came not from weapons or fear, but from people working together to protect what mattered most.